The fabric is now grouped into the 6 groups, and if needed, subdivided into the subgroups A1, A2, A3, and so on. And now if you're working with memory fabric, t-shirt fabric, baby fabric, whatever you're using that isn't quilting cotton, now we need to prepare that fabric for piecing. If you're working with regular quilting cotton, you don't need this video because your fabric is ready for piecing. You can watch this video, of course we'd love to have you, or you can jump ahead to the next video and piece your quilt top. Hi, I'm Julie Patterson of JCT Quilting, and I want to help you turn your memories into quilted treasures. Our memory fabric should now be organized into groups and maybe even subgroups. So now it's time to prepare this fabric for piecing. Okay, I'm starting with B1. I want this to be my large piece, which I'm going to have to adjust or open up somehow because it is not quite large enough like that. And then I'm going to get as many of the smaller B1 pieces out of this as I can, and then that will tell me how many I need to get out of this. Oh no, that snips. Don't think I want to use those. I would like to use these just because they're fun, and then I can keep this cute little ruffle. So to do that, I will use non-fusible interfacing, which is another word for I will use another piece of fabric, and I will attach it to the fabric. So here are some pieces that I have left over from other groups. I'm just going to see if I like, okay, well this is just fabric, which I can use. See if I like any of these other pieces to use so that a little bit will show on top so I can keep this lace. But then when you open the snaps, you'll see the other fabric. So what do I want to put underneath? I don't really want that texture. I think that would be too busy. I'm kind of liking this pink heart because it's kind of muted, or this one, but I really would like this white. Or, not that one. Or I also have this quilting cotton, which I actually used on another section as well. Kind of goes with that too. Yeah, I kind of like that. I kind of like just the white. This is a white sweater from a different piece. The downside of the white, I'm now realizing, is that then the white lace is on white and won't pop as much. But if I put it on this, definitely pops a little bit more. So if I use this quilting cotton, I don't need to do any fusible interfacing because I will just cut this to the desired size and then sew this fabric onto this. And I could fuse it first, but I don't have to. And with these snaps, I probably won't. And to do that, I'll show you how I do that. I don't cut this to size. I will leave it large, attach it, and then cut it down to size to allow for the shifting that can take place with it not being fused. So I do think I'm going to use this quilting cotton. This one's Art Gallery Fabrics. I've used it elsewhere in the quilt, so it does make sense to use it. And I just think it makes more sense to use that so it pops instead of these fabric scraps. But you do want to hold on to your fabric scraps because you never know when you'll need them. I have on other occasions used the scraps behind the snaps or the zipper or whatever the case is. Okay, let's get these scraps out. And I'm just going to start cutting. Most likely what I'm going to do on this one is keep this and then fuse the back, fuse the front, and by fuse I mean attach it to a fusible stabilizer. And then I will take strips from the back, and I might attach it to just one side. Then this will be off center, but then it's just one stitch instead of two, which can just less bulk. It's really just creative interpretation at this point. You could also just take it like this and attach it in the same way or applique it onto some fabric or to something else. But I'm going to try and make this big enough, and then hopefully I'll have some white fabric, although it's plain white. So, but enough from this and this to make all the pieces I need. So I'm going to get to work cutting. When I cut first, I'm just going to get rid of things that I know I'm not going to use, but I'm going to cut closely so I don't waste as much fabric. So I'll show you how I do that. Okay, I'm going to start by cutting this. Again, I want to use some aspect of this. Yeah, because I do want the snaps. I think they're fun. And that will work. I have cut the square that I will apply it on so I can see, I can get my quarter seam. I just want to make sure these snaps won't be on the edge at my quarter seam where I'm going to be stitching, because that would not be good. So I do have space. I'll try to center it, but sometimes when it shifts, it might be a little off center. That's okay. So I have that ready, so I just need to cut this out and then see what I can get from the rest of this. So I'm going to take my fabric scissors and just start cutting. I have found it's helpful to turn inside out just so I can, what I'm trying to get rid of is these bulky seams, and I can see those seams better inside out, but you know, personal preference on cutting. I'm just trying to get as close as I can, just so I can have as much fabric to choose from for the rest of my squares. So that's started. And sometimes I do use this part. In this case, I don't think I need it, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. But you just have to take each piece and decide, what are you gonna use from it? What do you need? These are short sleeves. I don't need the short sleeves. I also know I will not be using these snaps at the bottom. I don't have to get rid of this yet. I might end up needing it. I'm going to get rid of this seam though. Well, yeah. Open up the shoulders so I can lay it open. Because I'm using this part from the back, which that should still be okay. Hopefully I didn't just cut that too short. If I did, I'll just adjust it over. But what I was going to say is, because I'm using this back part, instead of cutting on this side of the seam, I'm going to try and cut on this side. Not like what I just did. Just to give myself a little more fabric to work with when I'm using that fabric scrap. And then I'm going to cut this seam. And you could use a rotary or your scissors. I just find initially I like to use my scissors. I won't be using that sleeve, so I can just cut that off. Okay. So now, yeah, I'm going to cut the sleeve. The sleeve is not going to lay flat. So when I'm trying to press, ooh, I could use that too. Okay. Oh, and the snaps. I don't need these snaps. Okay. Now that I'm looking at it, what I'm wondering, this little seam is just kind of bulky. What I'm wondering is if I want to do the same thing with this and keep this part, even though it doesn't have the snaps. I do like the lace. I don't have that anywhere else. I know it's not going to always lay flat, but just add some cute texture. So I might want to do 2 of the quilting cotton. Just lay it out. I'm going to cut these sleeves off too. And then I'm just going to stabilize a bunch of it. So you want to see that so I haven't cut it to the size that I need yet. I'm going to stabilize it and then I'll cut it to size. So I'm going to get some stabilizer strips so I can have options. I'm going to put this in my fabric scrap bag. I have some stabilizer. Actually, if I'm going to be, let's see. 7, 1, 2. And you can do this, I could be doing this on the heat press. You could iron. I'm going to use a t-shirt press, heat press to stabilize, to attach this. So this is like 2 squares, 2 squares. I need 7 of this size plus 2 smaller. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I'm not going to stabilize that. I could maybe get my smaller ones out of here. And then even if I attach that, well, yeah, I could do this. Try and get as much of this as I can. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually, that would be 7. I wouldn't need that, but I could have that. I kind of like how that is. So I could get my smaller pieces here. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just need 1 more. Where can I get 1 more square? Wonder if I cut this in half. Can I get any down here? No, the legs are just not wide enough. Okay. 2, barely. And that will be there. Where can I get 1 more? The other thing that I could do for the 1 more is you could take, you know, I could get half of it here and half of it here and then piece them together. It's okay to piece the fabric together to make a block, and I might end up doing that if I want to keep this lace. If I don't keep this lace, which I am keeping over here, let's see, then I could do that. Maybe that's what I'll do. I will keep 1 lace and not the other. I feel like all I do is count while I'm, oh, it still doesn't fit even if I don't keep the lace. I also still have this one, and I could bring in a fabric square from elsewhere on the quilt. Again, no one's gonna know. It might be more exciting than a plain white block. So I'm gonna stabilize this and this. And then this part and this part I'm going to attach, and so I'm not going to stabilize it because this will stabilize it. I just have to sew it to that. And I will think about where my last block is coming from. Okay, well, my heat press is warming up. I'm going to go ahead and cut this onesie. I'm going to be very careful. I want to get as much of this front as I can. I also decided, because I need 1 more block, and I don't have these fun snaps, this kind of snap, anywhere else on the quilt, I'm going to go ahead and keep these snaps. I will fuse them by stitching onto another item of clothing just to have in the background. But I just think it's a fun snap, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. So I'm going to cut, definitely want to cut up the sides, definitely want to get as much as of this, so probably keep the legs and just go up the sides. And if your items have staining, it's okay. That's just part of the story. It's part of the memory. You don't need to worry about getting rid of that. It's just part of the history of the clothing that we're including in this quilt. It's beautiful in its own way. So don't worry about staining and don't feel like you have to cut it all out. Okay. I'm gonna fuse some shirts and cut this. I decided I'm going to use the snaps on this onesie, but I don't know where to cut to separate the snap section from the decal section, and I want to make sure I don't cut too close to either one, but specifically the snaps. I want to make sure those snaps are centered on the square. So I'm going to stabilize them by sewing them onto a fabric square first, and then I will make the cut and work on the larger square. When stabilizing by sewing the memory fabric onto something else, either a stabilized piece of memory fabric or quilting cotton, it's helpful to put the memory fabric on the bottom so that the feed dogs get it. The feed dogs will have a much better time getting the memory fabric than your presser foot, unless you're using a walking foot, in which case it could go either way. So here I'm stitching down the sides to attach the memory fabric to the stabilized fabric from elsewhere in the quilt that I'm going to use to go behind these snaps. I want to make sure when you open the snaps you're not seeing the inside of the quilt. And then I'm going to follow a similar process to attach this part of the memory fabric to quilting cotton. Again, I'm putting the memory fabric on the bottom so that the feed dogs help it move through the machine, and I'm just going to stitch around the outside of my quilting cotton. That quilting cotton is cut to size, and it's giving me the sewing lines. It's telling me where I need to stitch. I'm stitching inside of a 1/4 inch so that the seams don't show when I piece this into the quilt top. And even though it's just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and stitch the lacing down at the top, again, inside of the 1/4 inch seam so you won't see this stitch. The blocks are done. I have this one that I did have to take a couple strips from the back. So you can see I stitched those, trimmed off the excess, stabilized all the pieces before sewing them together. Now that's the size I needed. And then I got, for this one I needed 2 littler pieces, so I have those. And then I needed 7 of this size. I have this one that snaps and unsnaps. And you can still see the lace. And I will stop my long arm so that this will not be quilted and the snaps will not be quilted. And then I have some plain blocks from that same fabric. Thank goodness that little outfit had so much fabric. And then from this onesie, these snaps, which are a different kind of snap. And this background fabric is stabilized and is from another part of the quilt. And you can see, you can use scrappy stabilizer too. You don't have to have just one sheet. So now these blocks are ready. And it's on to the next section, B2. On to B2. So these are the 2 fabrics that I picked for B2. I said I wanted this pocket. I don't really need that ruffle. I don't want this, it's just really small. I have bigger buttons. These I'll keep, because this is adorable. So pocket, pocket. Maybe I'll keep this just to, it's kind of fun to keep that seam line. I know I can get some squares back here. And then I might shift this. Oh, it can't shift. Oh, I bet I could unstitch that to somehow include this as my square. So I'm gonna fiddle with this. See if I can somehow keep a square, maybe include this, maybe not. If I don't include it, then I might include it on the back just to have it. Don't know if I'll keep the bow or just keep the rope running through. The bow, by the bow I mean this part. I don't know if I'll keep these dangles. Might be fun to have a tie. I think that'd be really cute. So I'm gonna play around with this, and I'm glad I didn't use this as the underlayer in B1. I was thinking about it, but I'm glad I didn't because I like it as the under. If I end up keeping this button, I'm gonna need fabric underneath, so it'll be this. yeah, so let's see how I cut. I'm going to cut this up the sides, stabilize all of it, and then cut my squares, and then figure out what I can do with this. I will say, if you have something like this, just go for it. It's fabric. I have more. If it doesn't work out, it'd be sad, but at least I tried. But just try it. Just go for it and just see what happens with it. It will help in this case. I will stabilize this, get the square that I need, and probably attach this by stitching. So that's a non-fusible interfacing. This is considered the interfacing for this. This will have fusible interfacing because it's memory fabric. But then this to this will be, I'll just stitch on the edge with a really narrow seam that won't be seen once I piece it in the rest of the quilt. Yeah, just see what I can come up with. And I know this is stitched in place, but I know I could unstitch this rope if this will fit in the square the size that I need. So let's see what I can do. I'm going to stabilize this one like I've done the other ones. Memory fabric on the bottom so that the feed dogs can get it. And the stabilized memory fabric on the top. That will go better under the presser foot. With this piece of memory fabric, I'm being very mindful of where those buttons are. So I lined up the stabilized fabric so that I wouldn't sew near the buttons either on this pass or when I'm putting it into the quilt top. I want to make sure those buttons are far away from the edge. I have B2 required some little pieces. And then this little piece I was able to sew in a part of the rope. So I have my little pieces, and then I needed 5 of these squares, and I was able to keep the pocket, the buttons, and a little bit of the rope, which I've just tied like this just to get it out of the way. And then I have my 2 pockets that I wanted to keep, and then 2 more squares. So B2 is done, and on to B3, which is my last group. Time for B3, and if you remember, this is all I have for B3. So I'm going to get all my squares out of this. I'm not going to keep the zipper. Maybe I'll keep the zipper. Maybe I'll keep the zipper. Keep it up under that. But I need all my squares from this, so I'm going to cut it apart and see what I can do. Pretty fast. It was just one outfit. Once I cut it up, I just laid out my stabilizer patches and then stabilized with my heat press, or you can use an iron, and then I got all my blocks. So they're all just the hearts from the pajamas. And then this one I was able to sew onto quilting cotton. I thought this pink went with the pinks and the hearts, and I didn't have leftover fabric from one of the other blocks that I liked with this. And so they will be able to open the zipper. I will not quilt over the zipper. I'll stop my long arm and then start again. Now we're done. That was the end of mine. I know it's B, but I did them out of order. So that was my last group. I'm ready to piece the quilt top. My rectangles are all labeled and cut to the appropriate size. It's time to piece. Thank you for watching this video to see how to cut and prepare your memory fabric for piecing in the Jill quilt. In the next video, we will piece the quilt top.